People have given us their time and they're here, and so let's go.
All right. Well, we are recording, so this will be archived and available for any of your trustees that couldn't make it tonight. Welcome to this evening's trustee training. This one is called Helping Boards Over Obstacles. And it's a way to look about what governs a board, how a board should work, what your responsibilities are, and then working with communication between board and director. I'm Maribeth Shafer. I am the Assistant Director and the Continuing Education Consultant at CKLS. And I will let Gail and Patty introduce themselves.
I am Gail Santy. I am the Director of CKLS, but I'm also the Director of the Great Bend Public Library. So I work with 2 library boards.
Good evening. My name is Patty Collins, and I am the Youth Services Consultant. And people ask me why I'm here, and I always say that when we're on the road, I'm here to drive, and when we're here, I'm just to look pretty. So as you can see, both Gail and I are in our homes. Maribeth looks like that she's in the mountains, but she's actually in her office. Both Gail and I are at home this evening. We spent a lot of time in these spots over the last 4 months, learning how to work from home again. So if you have a question that you're not comfortable asking out to the group, you're welcome to drop it in the chat in a private message to me, and I'd be happy to share that message out without saying your name or your library name. So we are glad that you're here this evening, and we hope to answer your questions and hope you learn some things.
Patty, will you tell them how to find chat and how to type into it for those who might not be familiar with that, please?
Yes. If you're seeing what looks like a Brady Bunch screen, which a bunch of little tiny happy faces, a lot of times your screen will go black at the very bottom. If you'll take your mouse and arrow down, you will see a toolbar appear. And way over in the left side, there's a microphone that says mute on it. And way over in the right, it says leave meeting. We don't want you to do that one quite yet. We want you to stay with us for a while. If you want to pull the chat up, down there at the bottom in the very center, you'll see a cartoon bubble. If you click on that cartoon bubble, you'll see the chat appear, and you can actually physically lift it up and set it off to the side of your screen so you can see that chat roll as well. They will also pop up as a new message comes in. They'll pop up over the faces at the bottom of your screen. So those are the couple of ways that you can chat with us. And to do a private chat, just find a name of a CKLS staff member. Maribeth or I are following that chat pretty closely, and click there and write your message if you want a private one. If you don't care if it's private or not, you can just ask it right in the chat, and it'll automatically default to everyone. And then we'll catch that question and make sure it gets answered this evening.
And if you would rather have your question answered privately, you can write it down and you can give us a call or an email. CKLS has what I call a hotline. It's a toll-free number to you. And you can get that from your librarian. I'll go ahead and put it in chat just in case.
And Amy's reminding us that if you have a smartphone, that if you want chat, you click on the 3 dots, and that'll be on the bottom right corner, I believe, of your smartphone. All right.
People are still coming in. Welcome. We're going to go ahead and get started.
Yes. And we do take attendance while we are doing a live broadcast. So if you're live here during the workshop, we've got you down. You'll get credit for attending. If you're watching the archive, then the archive will need to fill out a form telling us that you watched the archive, or your fellow board members later watch the archive so that they get credit later. Okay. All right. Helping your board over obstacles. A lot of times when we are requested to join a board meeting or to help a board, we notice that there's some obstacles that are preventing the board from operating in the way that it's supposed to, following Kansas law, or just operating in the way that's going to be best for your library. So we thought today would be a good time to go over what those obstacles might be and what the fixes are. I don't think we've found a problem yet that is not fixable. So
you are correct.
That's the good news. It's fixable. And I don't think that any problem that we've had is unique to one library either. If we've seen it once, if we see it at your library or somebody else's, we've seen it other places too.
Yes. what a lot of people don't realize, and we talk about this when we do trustee training face-to-face, and we'll talk about it tonight again as well, is that Kansas legislators, once upon a time, believed that library trustees were very, very important. I believe that, I've got someone coming in the home, so you'll hear outside noise there. Go ahead, come on in. I believe that library trustees are the most important volunteers in the community. And I believe that because there are actually Kansas laws that guide trustees in what they should do and how they should govern the library. Every once in a while we get asked, when we share some information, we get asked, well, is that CKLS law? No, we are not lawmakers, and we certainly don't want to be lawmakers. What we do know is library law, and we know the Kansas statutes for that. And so we'll be able to help you through that.
All right, I did share my screen. I wanted to show you where you can find trustee resources, and we'll start with talking about Kansas library law. So if you go to the CKLS website, which is ckls.org, you can hover over information, CKLS resources, and trustee training. Or if you scroll down, there's a CKLS resource guide, and you can find trustee training resources there. And it'll take you to this screen here. And it has all sorts of other resources that we will get to later on, but I wanted to click on the tab that was Kansas library law. All right, so we have library laws about meetings, about budgeting, library funding, library boards, and and then we have a list of all the library laws with descriptions. We're going to start with Kansas law about boards, because this is the one that's going to help your board function, help you get the members that you need and get them legally established to give you the power to run the library the way it should be run.
And that is what those laws do, is they empower the board to govern the library, to receive those tax dollars and establish the program of the library.
Right. So I just saw a typo on this. I always see it after I publish, it seems like. But the library board is appointed by the official head of the municipality. So for a city library, which is most of the libraries here, that means that your mayor appoints a board member, and then your city council would approve. And then for townships or district libraries, it's a little bit different. Your mayor is your ex officio member. That means by merit of his or her role as a mayor, they are a voting member on the library board. That means also that his number counts towards quorum. So your quorum for your board is 5 members. You have to have 5 members at your meeting to conduct business. Kansas library law also stipulates that your board members should be staggered so that you don't have all new board members all at once, barring unforeseen circumstances. And it also states when terms end and when terms begin. So even if you were filling an open role and you started in January, your term is still going to end on April 30th, and the new one will start on May 1st. A library board is also a corporate body, and this is very important. Gail, you want to talk about corporate bodies, please?
Yes, I will. So I'll come back to the word corporate, but the important thing about it is that the board works together. And so what we need to know is that no one board member is the boss of the librarian. The board working together is the boss of the librarian. And the reason that we talk about this is because if board members are not working as a single body, if they're working and operating from themselves as an individual, that's so if I'm a library board member and Patty's a library board member, and I go to Maribeth, who is our librarian, and say, Maribeth, I need you to do this. and then Patty goes and says, Maribeth, I need you to do that. What we're doing is we're operating as individuals. The better way to do that at a board meeting is for us to make a decision as a board and then explain what we want to Maribeth from one voice. Now, the reason that a board also needs to work together as a corporate body is because a library board can be sued as individuals if you are not operating as a corporate body. If you are operating as a corporate body, the board can be sued as a whole, but not as individuals. And so that's a very important point to make there.
Okay, and feel free to jump in with questions. You can unmute your mic or just put it through the chat.
We had a question in the chat.
Yes.
Asking about does the librarian count in the quorum?
No, the librarian does not count in the quorum. Your librarian should attend the board meetings and be paid to attend the board meetings and is there in the role as a technical advisor. So we've got a brand new librarian on board and there's not really a lot of technical advising she can do yet, but we'll get her up to speed. As the technical advisor, often the librarian has been with the library longer than the board members. And so the librarian will know that when it comes time to get new board members, the library board members don't go out into the community and say, hey, we want you to be on the library board. Come to our next meeting and we'll appoint you. That's not what Kansas law provides. The librarian then would say, oh, hold on a minute. That's not quite how we do it here. I've learned from CKLS that we can tell people what the library board does, and if they're interested, then they could go to the mayor and fill out an application and then be appointed by the mayor and then approved at the next city council member. The librarian as technical advisor is a really important role. I don't think I can stress that enough, but they don't get to vote. However, the board chair does vote. The board chair is a full voting board member.
So they don't just vote when there's a tie, they vote every time.
Correct.
So does the mayor get to vote?
The mayor does vote. The mayor can hold office on the board. The mayor is a regular member in every way has all the powers of a regular member by being in the mayor office.
Thank you.
Okay. The state law also talks about election of board officers. And the board shall, immediately after their appointment and annually thereafter, meet and organize by the election of the chairman or the president, a secretary and a treasurer, and such other officers as they deem necessary. That would be the vice president, vice chair. It also says that the board shall fix the date and place of its regular meetings, and special meetings may be called by the chairman upon request. So that means that you should have a regular date and time for your board meetings. So you can post those at the beginning of every year, or May through April, if that's your board year, so that your public knows when those meetings are, and those meetings are regular so people can find them. Right.
Unfortunately, the pandemic has caused a lot of library boards to have to offer special board meetings, and Kansas law provides for that as well. A special board meeting, if at all possible, needs to be advertised 48 hours in advance. The board chair or the librarian can call a special board meeting. An agenda should be prepared and made public, and notice for that special board meeting really can be as simple as putting a notice on Facebook and putting a piece of paper taped up to the door.
The outside door facing public going by on the street.
Yep.
Okay, I'm going to close this one. Let me think here.
one of the ways that we chose the basic topics for this workshop is because these are concerns that we see over and over again. And what we also see is if these basic things aren't running smoothly, they tend to cause a lot more problems. It steamrolls and snowballs, and they cause a lot more problems as time goes by.
And so that's why we thought we'd go over them tonight, just so everybody's aware of what is already in state statute. Again, we're going over the meetings. We kind of have them in two places, talking about when the new members are appointed, again, by the mayor and approved by the city. I want to emphasize this point one more time because this appointment is what gives your library board the power to govern the library, because you're a governing board, and to also set the library board and present that to the city. So that's why it's very important. It's very important to be appointed and approved.
Yes. Therese from Lebanon wants to know if the board needs to post agendas for the monthly meeting. Therese, that is a matter of public record and it should be made public. The law does not require that it be made public before a regular board meeting. It does require that for a special meeting. For CKLS, I posted out to our Google group right before the board meeting. And that way, if public is interested, they can attend the meeting.
Good question. I also want to talk about Open Meetings Act, because this is one where it trips up a lot of libraries. It is tricky. It is kind of hard to, abide by this law. So as Open Meetings Act, your library board meetings must be open to the public and the public must know about them. The only time they're not open to public is if you go into executive session, which we can talk about in a little bit if you have questions about that. The board cannot discuss library business outside of the board meeting, because then business is being discussed on a public entity where the public cannot be part of that discussion, or at least observe that discussion. This also goes into emails. So if you have an email string going back and forth trying to discuss something that needs to be decided about the library, that's actually, what is that called? It's an ongoing meeting?
It's serial meeting.
A serial meeting, thank you. I know I didn't have the right term.
It's the same thing. Mm-hmm.
And it's a serial meeting, but it's not open to the public because they don't have access to those emails.
So that makes it a violation of the Kansas Open Meetings Act. And that's an instance where people can be sued again. And so we don't want to do that. Now, when I send out the library board packet and the agenda, up at the very top of my email, the very first thing I say is, please do not reply all to this email. You can, my library board members can contact me as individuals for questions, but they can't reply all and ask questions of everyone, because then we've got a quorum of the board conducting a serial meeting in private.
So Gail, perhaps the library board gets together to have a fundraiser for the library. Are they able to talk to each other at that event?
No, well, sure they can talk to each other. Of course they can, but they can't discuss library business at that event.
Find that line and tow it.
As we always say, when people are heading home after trustee training, you can talk about the weather and books you've read to keep it safe. There's
a question. If a trustee misses a meeting, can a person review what happened at the meeting? So I'm guessing afterwards, review it. This would be what you would, that's why minutes are public. So you can review what happened at the meeting through the minutes and through those notes that are public. But if you mean like talking with a board member about what happened at the last meeting, I would say no, because then you're really close to crossing that line.
I would say they could contact the board chair and ask if there was anything, any deadline they needed to know about before the next meeting, for sure.
Okay. Okay. So yeah, be careful. I mean, be very purposeful for how you do it. You miss a meeting, contact that board chair and ask for the pertinent information. And then also, of course, read those minutes, because that'll be where the details are. Okay.
Do minutes have to be approved before sharing them with someone who wants to see them? I would say no, but that person who wants to see them fully needs to understand that these are not official approved minutes. That's an important thing to know. Does that help your question?
So this is Patty. Speaking in terms of those minutes, where are they kept and how can someone get to them?
Those minutes, the official minutes, along with all of the treasurer's stuff, should be kept at the library. And the reason for that is this. There is this thing called Kansas Open Records Act. And that means then that the minutes and the treasurer's financial information is kept at the library. Here's the reason why. Anyone can come to the library and request to see that information. In the last couple of years, I've had several requests for information, and these people were from Georgia. The Kansas Open Records Act required that I provide the information they ask within 1 working week. So I think it's 5 working days. And if I need to make copies and mail it to them, I can charge them for that. But otherwise, that is a matter of open record. So if you've got the treasurer keeping all the books at home, or the secretary has all of the minutes at home, if someone comes, and then that treasurer or secretary go on vacation. If someone comes to the library and says, hey, I want to see the minutes from July 1975, and they're not at the library, then that could jeopardize the library because they can't comply with that open records request. Charges cannot exceed the actual cost of postage or making the copies. That's correct. You can't charge them for the time that you spend looking for these things.
Okay, good questions. Please keep them coming.
Please.
Next on my list, I'm sorry?
I have a question from a member of our group this evening. The question is, how about scheduling meetings? Do they have to be at a time when the librarian can be there, or can they be scheduled whenever during work hours or their work hours? So basically, how do they ensure that the librarian gets paid, I believe is the question.
Okay, so at that meeting, after the board members the officers have been elected, that's when then the board decides what day and what time are going to be best for the meetings for the rest of the year. You don't decide in the July meeting when you're going to meet in August. And in August, you don't decide when you're going to meet in November. Every board member should get a list that says, here's what's going on for the year. We know that special things happen, like, just did, and sometimes meetings need to change, but that needs to be set in full. Usually boards meet when the librarian is available. That can be just after work one day. If the librarian is solo, it's a little bit difficult to run the library and be the technical advisor at a board meeting. If you've got more than one person, somebody else may be there. We were just in Jewel for a 5:30 board meeting, and the library closed at 6. So for that last half hour, the assistant was there and then closed the library and then left while we continued on with the meeting.
I know one library, the best time for everybody and for the librarian was 7 in the morning because it was before everybody went to work, and that's just the time that works best for them. But think about it, take some good consideration and consider all the elements.
Right, and if you need to change your board times and days from year to year, not from month to month, from year to year, you can certainly do that. You may have a real live one on the line and you want to really get them on the board, but they can't meet on your same day. My goodness, you can change that up. Change that day and time up, but only do it 1 year at a time.
So it's a situation where that the library is only open, say 3 to 6, 3 days a week, and the board has set that meeting for one of those days at 5 p.m. That is not the best situation because the librarian cannot do both jobs.
Right.
To give everything she needs. And also, certainly the patrons are welcome to come in and be a part of that meeting, but that's going to split the focus of the librarian
Correct.
on what she needs to know at the board meeting,
Right.
as well as being able to meet the needs of her patrons.
She won't be able to advise the board while she's off helping the patrons do something. Right.
Thank you.
Good questions.
Keep them coming.
I'll pull my screen back up if I can find it and talk about officer duties, and then we'll also talk about board responsibilities, tasks versus what the director tasks are. So as you can see, the president is the one who, this is also the chair, that we use those interchangeably. I'm not sure one's better. They can call for special meetings. The president can appoint committees, execute all documents authorized by the board, so signing those contracts.
Sign them and approve them. So there's a little caveat with that the board chair just can't start signing contracts willy-nilly. And my CKLS board meeting this month, we've got a $30,000 bill for something called OCLC. It's what helps your librarians catalog materials. And CKLS provides that for all of you. So and my board chair, I just can't send her the check and she signs it and she signs the contract. We discuss it at the board meeting first, just like all the other bills, and then the board chair can sign it and then we can pay it and on we go.
Thank you. The president will co-sign all checks and perform all duties associated with the office of the president, running the meetings, keeping meetings on track, all that fun stuff.
Mm-hmm.
The vice president will take on the presidential roles in the absence of the president. The secretary will keep the record of all meetings. The secretary is the one that posts the notice of the regular meetings and the special meetings.
And sometimes the librarian does that.
Sometimes a librarian does that, but this is an official secretary role, but that's one that can be delegated. And then the secretary is the second signer on the check. The treasurer should have a bonded position. So the position of treasurer should be bonded, not the person in that office. So the office itself is bonded at the amount fixed by the board that you would determine based on what your budget is.
So
okay, I'm gonna ask this question because this word just blows my mind. But in terms of bonding, I always think of the word glue, and that is not what we're talking about here.
Bonding is like insurance, and in fact, you'll purchase it through your insurance agent. And it is when you bond the position of treasurer, it's usually tied to the amount of your budget. So the cost to bond the treasurer in Bison, Kansas is significantly lower than it costs to bond the position of treasurer at Salina Public Library. And you bond the position, not the individual, because life happens and sometimes people have to leave midterm.
And you wouldn't have to want to bond the next person.
Yes.
In those roles, who's responsible for writing the agenda and creating it?
The president and the librarian working together make the best agenda. My board chairs want me to prepare the agenda. I send it to them. They add items, and then it comes back to me because we email out the packets.
Okay, the treasurer shall keep an accurate record of all monies received and dispersed, shall pay out all funds on orders of the board members by checks that are signed by the secretary and the chairperson. What was that?
So what does it mean when they pay out?
So that would be paying the bills, the contractual obligations of the library.
They're the ones who write. The treasurer is the one who writes the check.
Yes, and if your library has an accountant that does that for you, the treasurer's position should still be bonded because it's the treasurer's responsibility to look over all that financial information and make sure that it's correct and make sure that it's accurate.
Right. Okay. Well, I'll clarify this again because this is one that frequently gets boards into a little bit of trouble. The treasurer writes the checks. the president and the secretary co-sign the checks. The treasurer does not sign the checks. The reason for that is checks and balances and oversight. And
you may
Linda,
not believe it happens, but there have been public libraries in the state of Kansas where there was embezzling going on. And so this
and
is
they weren't big libraries.
this
They
is
were
a step to
small.
help prevent that from going on. There is a question in the chat.
There
How
is.
would we know if the treasurer position is bonded?
You could contact your insurance agent and they would let you know. Your librarian should probably know as well. And that is something that you want to keep in your minutes, your insurance policies and things like that.
And there is likely a yearly fee associated with that bonding. So I was recently on a library board meeting during the COVID crisis, and the librarian was stunned. It was a brand new librarian who was stunned when she got this bill for $128 or something from an insurance company at a time when they were not really expecting any more expenditures. And no one, because the board was all sitting new, no one knew about the $128. And luckily, Maribeth and I were able to fill in the blank, but then they had to backpedal a little bit on some monies that they were planning to spend because they needed to find that $128 to pay that yearly bond fee.
Yes. Diane says in Bison, it usually runs about $100. In Great Bend, it's significantly more. Maribeth, you're going to go into the roles and responsibilities. Good.
Yes, so the reason we're touching on this, we're moving away from library law now to more of roles and responsibilities, is because we've noticed that when there's some trouble in a board director relationship, it's usually because the roles of both are not clearly defined at that library.
This can easily cause friction between the librarian and the board and between board members themselves.
And we've also found that when boards are actually doing more of the library director's job, then they don't have time to be doing the stuff that they are supposed to be doing. So, or vice versa. If the director has to do the library board things, then the director's not able to do the running of the library.
Right. And what I've also recently observed in more than one library is that if you have a board chair who's just a really dynamic go-getter and they are, you know, oh, this needs to be done. Well, I'll do that. I'll take care of this. I'll take care of that. When it comes time to elect new officers, nobody's going to volunteer to be the board chair because they think that the board chair position has to do all this extra work. And so board chairs, if you're volunteering to do everything, you're actually preventing other people from stepping up and taking a role, a leadership role in the library board. And I can visit with you about that. That's why we say things like the agenda is prepared by the board chair and the librarian working together. And so I'll do this, these fingers meshing like this. We're going to use that a lot when we talk about the roles and responsibilities because there's a lot of gray area in there and not a lot of black and white.
We do have a question about receipts. When it comes to receipts given to the treasurer, how long are they needed to be kept for Walmart, grant spending, circulating material purchases, etc.?
Oh, rats, I can't remember. It's the same as at home for the IRS. Maribeth has an excellent document, and she in fact did a webinar on it that says, how long do we have to keep all of these things? Your board minutes and your financials, you have to keep forever. Your receipts, you don't have to keep forever. Maribeth's going looking for that, but she might not be able to find it right away.
Here it is.
She's pretty clever.
All right, so I'll put that in the chat link or chat box if I can figure out how to do it.
And you can also find on YouTube, the Central Kansas Library System has a YouTube channel, and it has, we do monthly chats and we talk about all kinds of different topics, and those are archived and you can go back and watch those as well.
So the comparison of responsibilities and the two lists of responsibilities for the director and the board are found in your trustee resource guide. Scroll to the very top, don't get dizzy. You should have a packet that looks like this. Gail's holding her print out up. If you do not have one, let your librarian know and we can send the library copies, because this is a very, very useful guide. So let me go back
a
to
lot
the
of pages, so we want to print it for you.
Yes, and we want to print it for you. Yeah, we don't want you guys to have to bear that expense. Okay, so this, I like the chart version because you can kind of see how the roles and responsibilities mesh. Gail, which ones do you want to focus on? Some specific ones, or?
Just give us an overview.
Okay, okay. So library boards are the governing body of the library, and the library director is the person that runs the library day to day and needs to be empowered to make the day-to-day decisions for the library. So the trustees are public officials. They are appointed by and approved by the city, and their duties and responsibilities are legally established. The library director is an advisor to the board because the library director knows how the library is running, the procedures that work best. The library director can suggest policies and help the board work out the policies. And then the library director be responsible for enacting those policies and finding the best procedure to enact those policies.
So what's the difference between procedure and policy, Maribeth?
So the policy could be that there's no skateboarding in the library. The procedure would be, how does the librarian enforce that rule, enforce that policy? And and then there also should be policy about consequences. The librarian should be empowered to decide if they need to go step by step through those consequences, or if the violation of the policy is extreme enough to skip over.
A board not having
how to do the things, and the policy is the overall rule.
Right. Now, a board not having the necessary policies is one of the big problems we see, but tonight's meeting does not give us near enough time to go into that.
It is important, however, that you know that the board and the librarian makes the best situation to write those policies, because the librarian knows the day-to-day part, and it sounds like a real good idea to say no skate in the library. We don't know that that's ever been a problem, and sometimes we're guilty of writing a policy for something that's never happened. It's also very important that the board has enough confidence in their librarian to make certain that they know how to make those policies fit through their procedures, and has the ability to enforce those policies in the way that they need to be enforced. And in a case where a librarian has staff, they also have that opportunity to figure out ways to make those procedures work in order to enforce those policies. So one doesn't work without the other, as well in the same way that the librarian and the board don't work without the other.
One of the other areas I see boards get into trouble is who hires who and who fires who and who does whose evaluation. I've said before that the board is the boss of the librarian. That means it is the board's responsibility to hire an enthusiastic and a dynamic librarian, or if their librarian is not performing to standard, it is the board's responsibility to terminate that librarian's employment and to hire a new one. The board is only responsible for hiring or firing the librarian or the library director. We're talking about the person who runs the library. The librarian or director, and we can use those terms interchangeably then, is responsible for hiring all the rest of the library staff and evaluating them annually. The board evaluates the librarian or the library director. That can be done a couple of ways. It can be done by committee, or the whole board can do it. If you don't have an evaluation tool, CKLS has a number of them, and we can guide you through choosing what's going to be best for your library. When a board starts to overstep that role and wants to be in charge of correcting other employees, or approving who the librarian is going to hire, that's micromanaging, and that's really overstepping the role that the board is supposed to play in this part. Both the library board and the librarian should have a nodding acquaintance with Kansas library law. I don't expect you to quote me Bible and verse. For heaven's sakes, I can hardly do it myself. But you kind of need to say, I heard something about that once, and that's a noodle scratcher. I think we better check into that. We might need to check what the law says on that one. And that's where CKLS is really glad to come in and help with that.
Okay. So the trustees are the big picture, long range planners. They should figure out what the vision, mission, and goals of the library are, not just this year, but in 5 years and maybe even 10 years. So if you know that your building is not going to be what it needs to be in 10 years, you have time to start planning for moving to a new building, getting the funds and grants you need to build or to buy or whatever. That's part of being a board member. Let's see. Also, the board is the one that's responsible for acquiring funding. That does not just mean setting the library budget and taking it to the city, but that's also going out and looking for grants as well. Now, a lot of times the librarian is the one that writes them and submits them, but the board should have a very, very active role in the grant writing.
Right. And part of that procuring funding is that the board needs to be very conversant, I would say, with the annual strategic plan, the annual system strategic plan from CKLS. And that does change from year to year, so you need to read it every year. We send it out to every library at the end of May, beginning of June, enough copies for every board member. Go over that during a board meeting, because that's a great tool for planning for the next future. Because in May, we approve, not me, but the full system board, which is a representative from every library and one from each county and one from each school district, approve the plan for the whole next year from January through December. So you know 6 months in advance. It's a great opportunity to start that forward planning. Attach dates to things so that you know when you want to have met this standard or that standard.
And then go ahead.
The board decides, are we going to work to meet this standard, or do we not think that this is something we can do?
And then it's the librarian's role to find the procedure, the step-by-step ways to meet those goals, to meet that mission.
Right. The easiest way to explain that is through the weeding standard. CKLS says that every library needs to weed their collection by at least 3% every year. So the board would say, okay, we need to weed the library by 3%. The librarian say, I can get that done by November of next year. And then it's up to the librarian to use the tools that CKLS provides her to decide what to weed and how to dispose of them according to the disposal of property policy. That policy is made by the board. It guides the librarian in knowing what to do with things that are no longer good for the library. So the board's not going to say, the librarian's not going to line up the books on a table and say, these are the ones I want to get rid of. And the board goes and picks and chooses. That's not the board's role. Again, that would be micromanaging. The librarian you hire, you need to be able to trust that they will be trained by CKLS and they will know what to do and what to do.
Another good example is with the pandemic. A lot of libraries had to have a special board meeting to decide when of closing sometimes or the reopening plan. So the board as a whole came up with a reopening plan, and then the librarian had to implement it. But most boards, and I'm hoping everybody here did this, they empowered their librarian to be able to make a snap decision if situation changed and they need to move back a step, or if things were going well enough she thought they could move forward another phase. Right. So the board gives the overall umbrella of the situation, and then the librarian has the empowerment to make the decisions for the day-to-day within that umbrella.
So this is Patty. why does whether or not a library choose to make a standard matter to them or to CKLS?
Well, remember that Maribeth said that the board is responsible for procuring funding for the library. When you look at those CKLS standards, you will notice that if you don't meet one of those standards, your library's base allotment will be reduced by 10%. That's why it's important for the trustees to make that decision. In small libraries, that could be as much as $500 that the library would lose if they decide not to meet the standards. Talking about procuring funding, we did talk about the librarian writing grants. Trustees can also write grants. Sometimes you'll luck into someone who is a very gifted grant writer and they'll be on the board. You want to use those talents. The trustee should present to the board and say, hey, I've seen these grant opportunities. Would you like me to write a grant for that? I'll bring it back for approval before it's submitted. So yes, trustees can write grant proposals.
Thank you. All right, go back to where I was.
There's so much.
While Maribeth is looking for her next screen, someone had asked me in the chat about library volunteers and staff as well. And as we get to those roles and responsibilities, as we've said, the responsibility for hiring and if necessary, firing a librarian lands on the library board, but all management of staff and volunteers falls to the librarian or library director. Those words
Right.
are interchangeable. So that information, that job falls to the librarian, and we wear an awful lot of hats at CKLS, and so sometimes those are the kinds of questions that actually land in our inboxes as well. That you might be the first-time supervisor and need some direction, and so we train on all sorts of things, and some things surprise us every day that they're things that we didn't know had anything to do with our library work. But we are always there for you.
Right, and for boards as well. Sometimes you find yourself in the position where your librarian is not performing to standard, and you may have to remediate the librarian, and you'll want to contact me for that. I've worked with a lot of library boards on this. And sometimes your librarian refuses to be remediated and needs to be terminated. And I have some amazing tools to help walk you through that, and I will be there for you every step of the way. That is one of the hardest things to do, and I recognize that, and I am there for you for this if you find yourself in that position.
Okay, we have a few minutes left. We wanted to leave some time open for questions. I'm going to send a link to this trustee resource guide. I started on page 24, and it has a good, forgive me, it has a good chart there for you to help see the comparison of duties.
Right. I do want to talk real quick about hiring, evaluating, and firing the director. We do recommend that the library director and all library employees receive an annual evaluation. We've talked about tools for that. That evaluation should be directly tied to the job description. We do have a nice variety of those available depending on size of library that we have for you to share. We have them as Word documents, so you certainly don't need to start typing from scratch. If you do find yourself in the position of firing a director, those two tools are going to play a really important part in that process. And we just want to really talk again about micromanaging. You as a library board have a lot of responsibilities, and you're the big picture. And if you're doing your job as the board, you really don't have time to run the library or to micromanage the librarian. If you find yourself stepping into that role, give us a call. Most often I see it's because the librarian is not doing what they should be doing, and the board has a passion for a good library in their community, and they end up stepping up and trying to make those things happen. It's not because they're micromanaging in the negative sense of the word. They're micromanaging because they want the best library for their community, and they just don't see any other way to get it done. And we're here to help you for that, with you that. We're here to help you with that for sure.
Gail, you had mentioned evaluating both the library director and staff. Is that tied to annual raise or money in any way?
It should not be. The truth of the matter is that most of our librarians are low-paid, skilled workers. By law, Kansas statute says that they are required to make a minimum wage. We encourage that they make about the same, if not more, than your city clerk. In some instances, that's really difficult, and we can help you realign your budget to make sure that your librarian knows that the board values their work with a good salary. We do not recommend that the evaluation be aligned to budget increases or, to salary increases. That's a whole nother discussion, but it's been shown historically that that does not get the best work out of your employees. It's not the best way to show appreciation to your employees. We've got lots of time for questions here. Well, not lots of time, but we'll always stay on a little extra in case you have questions. We've just highlighted it, just so you know. We do have a question in the chat. Is there a legal liability for board members with regard to COVID decisions? We have a governor requiring masks, for example. As a state entity, does the library need to enforce this? No, the library is not a state entity. And in CKLS, none of the libraries are actually city entities as well. The city may own the building, but libraries are governed and operated independent of cities and of counties and of states. And we don't have any county libraries in CKLS. They do exist in Kansas. So this is where the library board, operating as a corporate body of library board members that have been legally appointed and approved by the mayor. This is what gives you your power to set things like a pandemic plan and to determine what response to COVID is right in your library and your community. So there is no legal liability with regard to COVID decisions if the board is a legally established and operating library board.
Is a quorum for the township smaller than a city library?
Yes. This is a good, this legal liability question is, it rolls right back into that corporate body. And if for whatever reason, someone decides they can ascertain that they got COVID-19 in a library, that individual can certainly try to sue the full board, but they can, if that board is legally established and operating, those individual board members cannot be sued. And I've said that several times, and I don't want you to get all scared that this is going to happen, because it almost never happens. I don't know that it's ever happened in CKLS forever and ever. But it is something that is important to bear in mind. This is a responsible position that you have. You've been given a lot of power, and with that power comes responsibility and the need to be mindful. Come on, hit me with some good ones.
While you're thinking about that question, the question that we have been have answered many times regarding the mask, social distancing and mass gathering questions has really come because someone has come to us and said, well, the hardware store in town requires a mask, or the salon will only allow 3 people in. And those individual private businesses can make rules that are stricter than the city, than the county, than the state. We can't go less than the state, but we can become stricter than. And so that situation with the mask has landed on individual counties. And Gail and I both live in Barton County, and we have been watching that conversation very closely. Tonight, just right before our meeting started, we had a message that said our city offices have been dialed back because there is a case somewhere in our city government. We happen to know through rumors who or what that is, but because it's strictly rumor, we just kind of let that go. But we know that tomorrow we could hear something very different. Although we're not a city entity, that may give Gail some teeth on helping her decide, okay, if the city dials back, we might dial back. And we've had several libraries say, our doors were open and now we're closed to curbside only. You can come backwards and that's okay. If your librarian is one of those, or library staff are those in that population that is that highly susceptible population, that may be a reason that your library makes a decision to be curbside appointment or limit number of people in your library.
One of the things that I've had several libraries ask me is if they should be providing masks to people who come in. And while that is a very altruistic thing to be thinking about, I've said no, I wouldn't recommend it for two reasons. The first is those masks are really expensive, and that is going to blow your budget out of the water if you find yourself in the position to be providing 3 and 4 masks for those people who are in and out all day. And the other reason is because I don't want the library to be liable if someone says, well, I wore this mask in the library that I got from the library and I got COVID, so I'm going to sue the library. I never thought that I would be in a position to have to really, really dial into so many different legal questions. I was for you, Patty. And I just really, I find myself being very, very cautious. I had a good question in chat. What financial information needs to be available at the library? Is a bank statement and monthly profit loss good enough? The checkbooks should be kept at the library. Credit cards should be kept at the library. Then it's pretty much everything. What I always say is that the treasurer is going to get with the librarian or the library director before the meeting and get the receipts and get the checks prepared and things like that. Then at the board meeting, the checks will be signed by the president and the secretary. And then depending on what the procedure is in your library, they may go to the librarian to get those ready to send out, or the treasurer, they may work together. The treasurer will probably want to be able to do the paperwork, to look at the financial statement and to prepare the treasurer's report in the comfort of their own home. Some do come to the library to do that. If they do it in the comfort of their own home, as soon as they're done, that body of information needs to go back to the library at all times.
Another thing to keep track of is who has keys to the building. In
the Army, which is my background from years and years ago when I was a young and slim thing, keys were it's a restricted item. You had to sign for a key. Not every person on the library board should have a key. In most instances, the people who need keys are people who work at the library, who get paid to work there, not volunteers. The treasurer, you may want to have a treasurer have the key, and that way they can come into the library at their convenience and work on the books. And the city office should have a key. Really, not everybody else needs a key to the library. There's a lot of high dollar items in the library. CKLS puts a lot of money into your library, and we don't want that stuff to get lost. Libraries do get broken into and things get stolen, and it makes it really hard for the police to track that down if everybody in town has a key, or if people who've been off the board for 4 years still have a key. Keys should be signed for, and they should be a restricted item. Not everybody should have one.
I have one more question for you, Gail. What are the perks for being a board member?
Oh my goodness. Lots and lots. And I am excited when I retire to be a board member. Not of the same libraries that I work at, that's for sure. That wouldn't be fair to the next people, so they can move forward. The library board is really responsible for creating the best place in the community. In most of your small towns, the library is all you've got left. That doesn't mean you have to settle for less than stellar. Libraries are the hub of the communities, especially in small communities, and library boards help determine what that's going to look like. What do you want your library to be? Do you want it to be an information source? Do you want it to be the main source of recreation? If you want information, you want to make sure that collection is up to speed and you've got great things in there. If you want it to be recreation, as the library board working with the librarian, you're going to steer that budget to buy probably, yes, like this again, yay, yay. This is why I do it. It's the winning post. To buy more DVDs than books, or to be able to provide library programming, or to purchase the material, the equipment you need so that you can legally show movies in your library. Your librarians all know about the right way to do that. This is what the board does. You're not just there creating a better obituary for yourself. You're moving your community forward. Good, I hear laughing, and you should be. Good job, Linda.
So I'm not moving to the top of the holds list or getting influence on what books we buy as a board member?
No, not really. So as a board member, you don't represent yourself. You represent your community. You represent a segment of your community because you are one of them. And so as a board member, you don't really get a lot of special privileges that the regular community doesn't get. I don't hold myself above anybody else and move myself to the top of the list when the new Patterson or Steele book comes in, because I'm a servant leader. And as board members, you're filling that role as well. You're serving your community. Well, hello. You're serving your community, and in a very special way. I often say that. Go ahead, Maribeth.
As I say, the Pew Institute has
yes,
given the top 3 trusted institutions in the U.S. So you have first responders, you have the military, and then you have libraries. So take a moment and just appreciate the honor that that is. The American citizens and residents that have been surveyed by the Pew Institute find the library as a trusted institution. You are the place that people are going to go to feel safe, to find information, and to be. And that's awesome. That's the biggest perk, I think, is being a part of a library that's a trusted institution.
It is. You are an amazing job. We had a real quick question here before Maggie started cursing. What are the rules on donations? The rules on donations right now, I would suggest you take none. Normally, and the reason is because everything that comes into the library now needs to be quarantined for a specific amount of time, because we don't want active COVID coming in on library materials and infecting the library. Normally, with donations, I have a whole process that we train the librarians on. But what we only want to add to the collection is something that if I was sitting with this in my hands right now, and here's an old one, so this would be an excellent one. An outline of European architecture, because this is my pleasure reading, published in 1943. Okay. And it was $15 then, because it's a nonfiction book. So if someone donates this to me, I'm going to look and see how old it is. I'm going to look and see if other copies are already available. But the big question I'm going to ask myself on this book, which is beat up and old and probably out of date, is if I had the money right now, is this what I would spend it on to add to our collection? Okay. For money, monetary donations, say yes. I proceed with caution when it's things like furniture. And the reason being is because that can be difficult to get rid of when its time and lifespan have gone by the wayside. Here's something beautiful. This is just beautiful about board members and what are the perks of being a board member. Board members are vision casters, community builders, beautiful magical creatures who want the best for their local area and residents. That's a very poetic way of putting that. Yes. Every library should have policies on donations and on what to do when it's time to get rid of things.
Okay,
And
we have one more big question, but I just
yes.
wanted to add for donations, you can temporarily not accept donations, and the Great Bend Public Library has a sign that they put up to say, we are not accepting donations at this time. And then when they're accepting them again, they can put up another sign that says, we're happy to take donations, and
Yes.
then you follow the policy for that. Okay, Patty, you had a question.
Yes, and Maribeth and Gail are referring mostly to book and media donations when they're saying we're not taking them right now.
Yeah.
We will always take money, but we
Yes.
need to make sure that our policy covers that, because if they say you can have $300, but it must be spent on, and it's a really obscure item that you wouldn't normally buy, then you may want to think about that or explain that that's not how we accept the money. So we have a couple of questions, but this one is another COVID question, and this one we've been asked a lot. So Gail, you got your COVID legal brain on. It's not time for you to take your nap yet.
This is water, not vodka, so I hope I'm good.
You don't have to tell us. We know the truth. Earlier today, Christy was talking about a mimosa tree, and I was not thinking what she was. Can libraries enforce a mask policy if the county voted to opt out of the governor's latest mandate / executive order? Where is the line on what libraries can do? This question gets asked a lot from patrons, board members, and librarians.
Okay, this is a really big question with a lot of gray area, a glimmer of black and white at the end of the tunnel. The first thing that a library board should be very mindful of when they're enacting a policy, and I'll consider mask wearing to be a policy for this purpose. One of the most important things that they should consider is this something that the library staff will be able to enforce? If the answer is no, then it shouldn't be a policy. So if you have, like most libraries do, meek and gentle staff members, and you have community members who are a bit more forceful and dynamic and are very solid in their political beliefs and in their religious beliefs and in what they would consider to be their personal freedom beliefs, there's no way that your staff is going to be able to enforce a policy like that. You have children coming to the library, and all the recommendations I've seen do not recommend that children wear masks. You have seniors with breathing troubles coming into the library. Will you keep them out of the library because they can't wear a mask? What about someone who's wearing a respirator and is not physically able to wear a mask? Will they not be allowed to be in the library? Will your policy exclude those people, but yet require your librarian to ask why they're not wearing a mask? And if they say, I can't wear a mask for medical reasons, is the librarian supposed to somehow bully those people into declaring what their medical reason is? Because that would be a violation of the American with Disabilities Act. Requiring a certain segment of population to wear masks and not the other puts you in a lot of murky water with the ACLU. For example, some libraries have changed their policy on the age that children can be allowed in the library because of COVID-19. We know children touch things. Some libraries have changed that from, say, 8 to 13. That is a real thin ice with the American Civil Liberties Union, because you've targeted a segment of population. Children under the age of 13 are not particularly vulnerable to COVID. If you were thinking logically and you were going to exclude a portion of population from coming into the library, it should be people with color hair, Patty and I, and Anne, and probably 50% of the people on here, anybody over the age of 50, we're the vulnerable population. We're the ones who shouldn't be allowed into the library. So you really, really need to proceed with caution. I do not recommend that libraries try to enforce a policy that requires masks. In fact, all along, we've recommended that every library who established a pandemic plan check with their county health official and to follow the guidelines by their county health official. So Linda says, if our county has enforced masks, we still don't have to request people to wear them. No, Linda, that's not the case. If your county is enforcing masks, you would require people to wear them. And I can send out some wording tomorrow or next week to help library staff say that in a comfortable way. Here's the way that I'll just tell it to you now quickly. We're really running over time, and I'm mindful of your time with us. We aren't going to be able to offer service to you if you don't come into the library with a mask. We might be better able to serve you through curbside service or something like that. We will send out language to help the librarians do that. I have, from the beginning, first part of March, said align yourself with what your county is doing. Do I think my county officials acting as the health officials are making the best decisions? Nah, I'm not. I don't think that. And I bet that some people think they've not gone far enough, that we don't have to wear masks, for heaven's sakes, let's not wear pants either, you know. But that is my personal feeling, and that is not me as the library director. In the Great Bend Public Library, we're not required to wear masks. Our patrons aren't. Our staff members is a different thing. Our staff members are required to wear masks if they're in a public space, if they can't maintain their social distance, and especially, we talked a lot about personal responsibility, and our staff members need to be responsible for themselves. There are a whole bunch of us who go to the restroom with a backpack, and it's got all sorts of cleaning supplies, and we clean before we go in and after we come out. So we've really got to time that. Yes, you've not heard the pants comment before. It's because it's after 7:30. My brain's a little tired now. The filter goes away after a little while. I want to thank you all for being here. We've talked about some great things. You've asked some amazing questions. What I really want to impress on you is we talk about Kansas library law, and what we really want is for library boards to be compliant, because we've seen a way that library boards can get themselves into a lot of trouble if they're not compliant with these things. But we're not the library police. If one of you contact us tomorrow and say, hey, we're doing it wrong, our treasurer is signing the checks, we don't have library sheriffs that we can call to come and get you. What we're going to do is we're going to say, okay, these are the steps you need to follow to get yourself straightened out with this.
We're going to help you.
Right.
We're going to help you get back on track.
It's our job to help you. It is our pleasure to help you as well. We care very passionately and deeply for our librarians and our trustees. We are working for you equally and for libraries equally and librarians. So if you've got some of these things going on in your library that we talked about that shouldn't be happening, give us a call and we can help you get on the right path. It's what we really want to do. We love our work, and we really love helping all of you make some amazing libraries in your communities. And thank you for spending time with us tonight. We'll stay on for just a little bit more, but we're going to go ahead and stop.